What was the most gut-wrenching thing your parents did to you? My parents were workaholics who had a knack for neglecting their unwanted child, me. They had started a business together, and that business was their life. My birthdays were often spent without my parents, as they would just give me some money and tell me to go out and buy whatever I wanted. But what would a 10-year-old child want to buy except his parents' attention? That wasn't even the worst part. When I turned 18, I asked my parents if I could work part-time for them at their business. They flat out said they didn't want me there, and then walked away from the conversation. Soon after that, they told me to move out, and even handed me an official eviction notice. I had to get help from a friend's dad who owned a truck. I ended up renting a cramped apartment that had bed bugs in it, and then found a job at the local convenience store. But the manager was a control freak and fired me after a few months. I couldn't find a steady job after that, so I ended up going homeless, which was the lowest point of my life. I tried begging my parents for help, but they couldn't care less and blocked me. Thankfully, one of my friends found out I was living out of a tent and offered to take me in for a little while so I wouldn't freeze. She suggested I contact other members of my family. I was able to call my grandparents from my father's side of the family, and they were very surprised to hear from me. They were furious after learning about the situation and basically adopted me, flying me over to live with them in another state. They even cut my parents off from their will. Anyway, thanks to my lovely grandparents, I was able to go to community college. I graduated with a good degree, and eventually, my grandparents gave me their house. My grandma wanted to live in a warmer climate as the cold winter was getting harder and harder on her health every year. I was sad to see them go, but I happily bought the house since they sold it to me for 1/3 of its value. However, one day in late 2020, I came home after being away for over 2 weeks and saw a white van parked in my driveway. I felt dread inside me after realizing the van had the logo for my parents' business on the side of it. They had broken into my house and were living in the guest room. I told them to get the hell out. Grandma and Grandpa had sold it to me when they retired, so the house belonged to me. They'd have known that if they were in any way involved in my life, but they threw me to the wolves 10 years ago and had no remorse whatsoever. My father told me it was his parents' house first, and that meant he and my mother had the right to live there if they wanted. I just walked right into my bedroom and called the police. But surprise, surprise, the cops weren't any help. My parents made up a lie about how they had squatters' rights, and it worked because I didn't have any cameras. My mother even pulled out the waterworks, which was honestly kind of impressive. I ended up having to take them to court. Meanwhile, my parents were squatting in my house and rubbing it in my face. Apparently their business went bankrupt, and they sold off almost everything to pay their debts. So they were really happy to live in my house rent-free forever. They were still working odd jobs, but refused to give me rent. They basically just handed me a $100 bill every month and said I should be grateful they were paying me anything at all. They said I already took away 18 years of their life and should be thankful they aren't demanding any money back. I was so at my wit's end, but I couldn't do anything that wouldn't make me end up in trouble with the law. I decided